I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey, well, I need a dollar, dollar.
I want to welcome everyone tonight to our Founder Institute Southwest event on funding. This is a very popular subject matter right now to all of you that are founders out here in the world looking for your first investments in your first startups. My name is Chris Foltz, and I'm the director of Founder Institute Southwest, which Las Vegas, Phoenix, Tucson, some of the greatest cities in America are in this space. You know, tonight is our first event in a series of events leading up to our accelerator, which launches in February of 2022. Founder Institute's the world's largest pre-seed accelerator, originally started in Silicon Valley by one of our friends, Adeo Ressi, who happens to be college roommates with Elon Musk. Let me tell you, there are some interesting stories from all of that. Founder Institute's graduated over 5,000 startups, some companies that y'all may be aware of, companies like Udemy, Mint, you know, some amazing companies and technologies that we all use on an everyday basis. One of the things that I'm the most proud of with Founder Institute, and this goes for all of our programs throughout the world, is the quality of mentorship. And tonight I'm joined with a few of my friends who are also FI mentors, who I've got absolutely tremendous respect for, all of which come from different backgrounds in the funding arena of the startup ecosystem. You know, I'm going to start just with my friend Mario Mitchell. You know, I first met Mario in the Las Vegas startup ecosystem. And it's, you know how you meet people and you've already heard about them a dozen times. Mario's one of these particular people. And I remember, you know, we both serve on a task force committee for the city of Las Vegas and the mayor and city council in bringing in some of the best, we'll call them best practices and procedures for our city to use to benefit startups. And just hearing him drop ideas and knowledge, second to none. And when I first met him, you know, he was focusing on his BIPOC fund, Dear Mama Fund. You know, he's got his own fund that he's launching today. He's got some interesting things to talk about. So we'll get back to Mario in a minute. Next to him is a friend of mine, Jeff. Let me tell you, Jeff, now on LinkedIn, he has his name pronounced, you know, written out, Tatarchuk. So I'm going to basically give it to him that way tonight. You know, Jeff, I first knew about Jeff from his TEDx speech in New York. One of my colleagues in New York runs the TEDx on Water Street. And here's this interesting guy with an interesting last name that's giving one of the most authentic speeches about perseverance. You know, and I'm a former addict. I'm a former homeless person. I've lost everything in my life. But, you know, to hear Jeff's story of perseverance and what gets him, you know, up every single day and what drives him, and seeing how that manifests into his ventures and funding and startups is second to none. So happy to have you here tonight, Jeff. And then, of course, you know, I mentor all over the world. And one of the questions that people ask often is, you know, Chris, who's your mentor, right? And it's been very hard in my life to determine that. You know, when I was a child, I would say it was Grimace or Ronald McDonald, but that's just because I was a husky kid until I met Russell Brand. Now, when I say Russell Brand, no, it's not the eccentric actor. It's the eccentric Silicon Valley pioneer who's also on this with the amazing top hat tonight. I love this guy to death. You know, Russell Brand is an engineer from MIT and Berkeley, and he's about the exact opposite person of myself. And we're business partners. And I could tell you, you know, a lot of times in the startup world, we all think we need to meet up with a psychologist, get some help. It took a MIT engineer to work through some of my complicated approaches towards life. So thankful to have you here tonight, Russell. Russell is one of the most sought after advisors in Silicon Valley. And when it comes to Founder Institute, he's been an investor in most of the select portfolios. And we work on some amazing startups together. One of the things I'm really excited about is Mars, the new rocket engines, Mountain Aerospace Research Solutions that we're both working on right now. And you're going to hear a lot about this, which is also an FI graduate. So I'm going to go around the room and I want to have everyone just tell me a little bit about your background. Of course, you got the Chris Foltz story, but how did you end up here? And, you know, and ultimately, I also want to know, you know, what are the most common questions I get, and I think it's veiled, is, Chris, will you introduce me to investors? I think that's the more common way of saying, hey, listen, will you invest in my fund? Here's a random email that's to convince you of this. I want to know from all of you, What is your answer to that question when somebody randomly comes up and tries to get you to either invest in their brand or introduce you to investors? I'm going to start with Mario. Mario, welcome tonight. Tell us a little about yourself and then answer that question.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Chris. Hi, everyone. So I'm Mario Mitchell. I live out in Las Vegas. I'm actually a military veteran. So I actually started my whole adulthood in the military. So I joined right after high school, 17 and a half. My mom had to sign her name on the dotted line, not me. And that's how I truly started learning. I was pararescue the first 3.5 years, but I didn't really learn anything about corporate America until I actually got hurt and had to take a desk job. And I spent a lot of my time learning technology and how to really speak with professionals. So I was briefing generals and whatnot on a daily, and I never understood what that meant till I got the military. Fast forward after the military, I actually started doing a little bit more entrepreneurial things. So I wanted to open a restaurant. I went to culinary school. I tried a couple different things out and landed back in tech somehow. Started a marketing agency. And I went out to New York and discovered Bunker Labs, which is a very entrepreneurial community. And I realized I didn't have that here in Las Vegas. So 1.5 years of me trying to get it here, I got it here. And I actually been advising on startups in that community for a minute. And, by the good gracious of someone, they're like, Mario, you're so smart. I'm starting a fund. Do you want to take part in it? And I was like, for sure. I love building ecosystems. So that's how I got into Dear Mama Fund. Which focused on promoting women entrepreneurs, Black and Brown, and veterans, because we all were vets and part of that initiative. And that's when I started really talking with different people in ecosystems, and I discovered it's not just Vegas that has an issue of getting funding, because I had a business, I raised funding, but it was so tough for me to do. And I realized it had nothing to do with my ideas. It had to do with identifying people that want to invest in people that look like me. And once I discovered that, I joined that VC firm. So after being there for a little over almost a year, actually, I decided I wanted to start something new, because I became that guy talking to people all over, in the ecosystem, scouts and everything. I was like, I want to do that. So branched out to start my new venture, Mech Ventures, and it's actually been super fun, because I realized today being a general partner is not as bad as it was doing an ecosystem build. I still get to talk to people, hear great ideas. But now I'm adding this portion of raising funds, and that's the piece that we don't get. And I always tell people, I'm a fan of not promoting people that look like me, and I say that because that's the status quo. I'm a Black male, raising funds, so I'm expected to put money to other Black founders, and that's not who I am. I promote innovation. Don't put me in a box and think that's what I'm going to do, because there's so much in the world out there.
That's remarkable, Mario. I find this very interesting. So when I met you, we stood on the stage next to each other, and you drew attention to this major gap, not just here in Las Vegas, but around the world, when it comes down to, well, first, the gap of BIPOC investors. It's not that the founder lacks there. It's just oftentimes the investors, it's not even necessarily the access to money as much as access to experience, mentorship, support in the market. And, I'm like, this is amazing. This is great. And when I asked you about your new firm, which I found interesting, I'm like, Mario, listen, are you going to BIPOC woman veteran route again? And your answer to me was, Chris, I'm colorblind on this one. Tell me what you meant by that. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, like I said, I'm colorblind because the expectation is, Mario, you're going to do this BIPOC thing again. I'm like, no, I realize there are a lot of great ideas out there. And if I silo myself to only look for certain founders, I'm siloing great ideas. So I don't want to be that guy, because I'm also discriminating when I do that. And
I think that's amazing.
And that's the problem. And the lack of experience in this world is the fact that we don't have enough Black and Brown and women partners in VC firms. So I'm like, let's not do that. Let's start creating opportunities to get those people that I want to serve behind the deal, so that they can actually go out and promote and fund other businesses as well. So I kind of switched roles, and it's because I learned. I'm always learning, and I learned that we have founders, but I can't fund every business. So you take the route of, let's create other VCs, other partners that's going to come out and do the same thing I'm doing. Then we can actually get that funding out there to the BIPOC community.
I think that's great. And I'm sure as a Black funder and somebody that's involved with this, Do you notice that the majority of the people that come up and ask you, hey, Mario, will you invest in my company? Would you find them to be from underserved populations, or do you get the, everyday person who's not taking into consideration your funds, original funds, BIPOC focus?
It's 50-50 split. Like, people hear dollar amount, but I actually love to have that presence. And I actually want to hear that in the underestimated communities a little bit more, because I grew up thinking I can only ever work for someone. So I go inside these communities, I'm like, hey, you can be that boss, you can create because you have ideas. And I'm trying to get that to be the question I get asked when I go back to the west side of Las Vegas and places like that.
I think that's fantastic, Mario. Huge fan of what you're doing. I'm going to jump over to Jeff here. Jeff, we both were on that same stage together with Mario when he was talking about this. And, I love your background. I love your history. I think, you're brilliant in all this. But one of the things that I want to know from you is, first, tell us a little bit about your background. But we had an interesting back and forth on LinkedIn this week, and I'm going to draw attention to that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeff, and why you're here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. And yeah, it's always good to be back here with Mario. And looking forward to hear more about what Russell has going on as well. I'm from Southern California, from San Bernardino, California, the Inland Empire, not originally LA. My parents still live in the same 2-bedroom, 1-bath house they've been in over 45 years. So I was raised in a more urban context, also lived in Chattanooga and Michigan, all over California. And I have a heart for providing opportunities for people that don't know they exist, and creating paths, because I didn't know they existed. My mom was a secretary, my dad was a nurse, and I knew nothing about business and nothing about entrepreneurship, but I had started businesses all along the way just to make money. My parents never gave me any handouts, but from a young age, whether it was starting car washes on my street or, I couldn't afford the clothes my friends had, so I'd make my own clothes and start selling them to my friends at school, and just knew that I had a knack for starting things, but honestly didn't know what it was until entrepreneurship became in vogue and people started talking about it again. I said, okay, I guess I am an entrepreneur. That makes a lot of sense to me. And built 7 different businesses, 5 of which have been sold or acquired, fundraised over $10 million, different ventures from different things, whether it was VC, private angel, grants. I've done the for-profit, the nonprofit side of fundraising. And I love the entire process, from ideate, fundraise, the acquisition, rinse and repeat. So it's been really exciting to continue to be a part of that whole process and help entrepreneurs who are at the very beginning of that process, who don't see the light yet on the other side of the tunnel. They know they have an idea. They know they want to make that idea a reality, but it still seems ominous to them. And I like working with people at all stages of that process to help them get to where they want to be. So right now, I'm all in on one of my current ventures that I put a lot of money into. And it's called VMXL. We do high performance cloud computing, and I focus on marketing with that company. But I also have an angel fund, a private angel fund that I use to invest in companies that I'm excited about, people that I see doing cool stuff that I don't personally have the time to do. People used to call me an ideator. And I wish I could spend time on all of the businesses that I have ideas that I want to start, but I just don't. But I love being able to empower people that do have ideas to be able to fund them to make those ideas happen and continue to mentor and work as an advisor for those companies. So it's cool. I feel like I'm scaling myself with that, which has been fun.
Now, did you make the clothes you're wearing tonight, Jeff? I mean, based on your background.
I did make this one. It's kind of stayed a trend since middle school.
This week I had posted online, I know you from a VC conference that we spoke at. And in your bio, as a mentor from FI, it had venture capitalist and then, of course, your role. And, there's not that many times where on LinkedIn, somebody posted, not the private message, the directly on the public wall, Chris, my bio's messed up. I'm not a VC. I'm an angel investor. I have specific thoughts on the matter. Yes. What was that all about? I found that very interesting. I even came back and told Russell about it. What did you mean?
So again, it's because I've done the fundraising route from angels, VCs, and we're currently doing a SPAC. The experience I had with VCs was interesting. I mean, it seems like it's a huge leap in order to get in front of VCs to get funding in general. It seems like you have to be in Silicon Valley, or you have to have a certain background or traction in order to get in front of VCs. But I don't know. My take on VCs are, a lot of times they are. And I got this from John Mackey, the Whole Foods founder. He says VCs are hitchhikers with credit cards, and they'll pay for your gas as long as you're going in the direction they want you to go. And as soon as you go in a direction they don't want you to go, they kick you out and they put somebody else in the driver's seat so that you can keep going in the direction they want you to go. And so when it comes to fundraising, it's super important. Not all money is good money. I think there's certain stages in a startup where a VC is appropriate. We're actually at a stage right now in our company. We're doing a Series B, and we're actually looking at the VC route and raising $50 to $150 million. So yes, totally appropriate at certain stages. But I think at the very beginning, you watch Shark Tank and you see these guys who call themselves VCs, and you think, well, I got to get in front of a VC. I say stay away from VCs as long as humanly possible. I just read a book by the Salesforce guy. I forget his name. Anyway, it's Behind the Clouds. And what he talked about was, he says, in the VC work, 2 out of 3 founders get kicked out as soon as you get funded by a VC. They don't last because their job is a financial fiduciary responsibility to the fund that they are managing. And so it's not necessarily to the founder or to the CEO who started the company. They're not responsible to them. They're responsible to the fund. So they need to make sure that it's successful. And he said 2 out of 3 founders that go to a VC get booted out and plugged in by somebody else who already has a track record. So yes, there is a place for VCs. I'm not one. I'm an angel. I give private money, and I work that way. I do think there's a place for them. But yeah, I do have strong.
I really appreciate your candor on this. Russell and I have these conversations on a regular basis, and we're getting to Russell next here. One of the things, I think a lot of people don't really know the difference between angels, VCs, private equity, where they live, et cetera. I could tell you, I didn't know at the very beginning. So I really appreciate this. Going to Russell, Russell and I serve as advisors to some funds, in addition to tons and tons of founders. Russell, what is your take on all this? I know you've been an angel for quite a while. Tell me a little bit about your background, not that I don't know, but for the world to know. And what is your general, if you had to summarize your viewpoint on what's going on in the funding world right now, Russell, what is that?
Oh, so I started pretty much accidentally 3 software companies that did well enough for all the founders to retire from each one, but not well enough for anyone to have ever heard of us. The first one on our first project taught the federal government about what's now called open source software. It didn't have a name back in those days. First project is estimated to save the American taxpayer $250 million. Nice if they could have given all of that to us. So I've invested directly in about 50 early stage companies and indirectly in about another 250. And I've served on the due diligence committee for various syndicates and Keiretsu Forum. And on the numbers, taking an investment greatly decreases your chance of success. And so the first thing to say is an investment the right idea? Because every minute you spend dealing with an investor is a minute you're not spending finding customers. Customers are better than investors.
Great point.
And second, what is the long-term game for this? The only thing that investors want to invest in is companies that are going to have exit events. Supposedly IPOs, but in real life, that's acquisitions. If you can't say, here are the people who are going to acquire us and why, you shouldn't be asking for investment money. You shouldn't be taking investment money even if it's handed to you. Life is better without investors.
I think that's prolific, Russell, and we talk often about bootstrapping. And I can tell you, to all the people out there that I'm your trusted authority for information, Russell's mine. Every single day, Russell calls me out on we'll call them errors in my thought process on a regular basis. And I learned so much from this. And, one of the errors I had was an understanding of what bootstrapping is from a true functional standpoint. And I started learning about this when, Russell would tell me, hey, listen, Chris, this company's not meant to be going down this particular path. If you have 1,000 hours to spend, are you better served chasing funders or chasing customers with that 1,000 hours? And I thought that was fascinating. Russell, describe a little bit about bootstrapping and where does that fit into the startup ecosystem in regards to funding?
Well, bootstrapping is the idea that your customers are paying for everything, and often paying for things that don't yet exist, but maybe they're paying for things as they made it. My first company, at one point we had 50 employees and we were taking in $10 million on one contract, and we never took an outside dollar. Right, the money from our first contract paid our second contract, and so on and so on and so on. And so at the point that customers are paying you, customers are keeping you honest. You will never build a product that no one wants if the customers are paying you as you go along. You will never add 100 features that no one will ever use if the customers are paying you that go along. Your biggest risk as a startup company is you're going to build something that no one wants. Half all the companies die that way. If you're bootstrapping, you've removed that risk. Bootstrapping is your friend. Now, if you're making the next interstellar time machine anti-gravity cure for cancer, you can't bootstrap because it takes millions or billions or trillions of dollars and hundreds of years. But if you're making a piece of software or you're making a better hat, you can almost always bootstrap and be happier both in the short run and the long run, and have a better chance of success.
That's such great insight. I mean, you took the Bill Nye approach to the delivery, so I thought that was fantastic. One thing that I learned from you recently, Russell, I noticed Lucy, one of our guests today at the panel, she had drew attention to the fact that there's no women on the panel right now, as we're talking about diversity, as we're talking about this. And I thought that great point. So thank you for drawing attention to that, Lucy. Trust me, we have plenty of fantastic mentors, and we have some coming in our November 11th event. But Russell, you drew attention to the idea of an interesting statistic in Silicon Valley. When it comes down to women, when it comes down to going after the VC funding versus the women who get angel funding, and some of the outcomes that happen to this. Do you mind sharing that, Russell?
Well, let me tell you my new story for today about women entrepreneurs and women funders. Yesterday, I spoke with a woman with a brilliant idea. I think it's the most promising first meeting I've had with a company in 20 years. And 100% of the women I described the idea to got it like that. And 0% of the men got it. On first hearing it, myself included, 0% of the men. So there are all of these opportunities out there that the men aren't going to get. And when men as investors ask women about companies, they ask about downside risk. How are you going to stop something that's going wrong? Same company will ask a man, how are you going to take over the whole world? And as a result, the women aren't talking about the best parts of their companies. It's not what they're asked. And so the women's companies tend to be invested at a lower than fair valuation. And as a result of that, even if everything else were equal, they'd be a better investment in the long run. And on average, there's a whole class of mistakes that women are less likely to make than men. And so investing in early stage women-run companies is a great idea. Investing in companies where your founder group, where all the founders are as different as possible, is a great idea. And these are great ideas, and the stats are there, and everyone knows it. And last report I saw, 97% of the people who invest aren't even thinking about doing it. There's great opportunity to people that'll go look past their preconceptions. It's better return, it's lower risk, it's great things on the market. Hopefully we'll be less stupid next time.
I think that's fascinating. And the beautiful point of this is that, in short, women are ran companies, and women founders have a faster pathway to profitability with the angel investors than men. And I think that I think that it's fantastic. And I think that this is going to change the dynamic a lot. When it boils down to diversity, I know somebody in the chat mentioned, hey, listen, I've got an interesting product. I'm just going to say the name. I believe it's Veggie Plug. So thanks for sharing that in there. She, in fact, said, hey, listen, we could probably guess what this is. But you see, what I find is very interesting now is that a lot of rooms are now being dominated by women. I just got back from the cannabis convention this past week, several of them here in Las Vegas, MJ Biz. And to see the women-led companies out there who are demanding the attention in these investor rooms is fantastic. And, growing up in a female household, raised by my big nanny, and my mother, you have a different respect. And I thought it was interesting, Russell, that you said that there are some mistakes out there that women founders make less than men. And this is appealing towards funder. Can you give me an example of something like that?
When you're a founder, you need to have some really strong beliefs. So you wouldn't be here at all, but you need to be holding on to them very lightly. So if there is evidence, you'll say, nope, I was wrong, go in this other direction. On average, the women founders will listen to that evidence sooner. They'll hear people out, and it might change their mind, it might not, but at least they hear the opposing view. And most of the men, it's, I don't need your views. I don't need the facts. I know what I'm doing. And they go at 100 miles an hour and crash right into a brick wall. You don't see women doing that as often.
So men, we're just much more hard-headed, I guess, in this regards. And, we should take note for this. Mario, I know you were very, very animate about, women founders and the kind of gap that we have here. And you drew attention to something in the green room prior to this, Mario, how, here in Las Vegas, we get these companies founded, we get them funded, but the funding and a lot of this comes from outside of the space, right? Outside of Las Vegas, outside of the state. And then sooner or later, what happens, the success happens with these companies, BIPOC company, women-led company, veteran-led company, does not matter. They ultimately end up leaving the area and going where the investors are ultimately at. Being somebody that focused on BIPOC and women through your career in veterans, what have you noticed about some of the founders that come from the traditionally underserved populations? Is it a different ask when they come to you for funding? Is it a different approach, or is it the same as everyone else? What is your observation, Mario?
So I'm gonna take it from my point of view. When I started my first business, because I'm not surrounded with these opportunities every day, I actually asked for way less money than what I probably should have. Also, going back to what Jeff was saying, like, not all money is good money. So I was also taken advantage of. So like when we have those people that's coming from, and I always use the word underestimated, because I think underrepresented is a title that was just going there. It's a label that the government kind of put out there so that we know who we're talking about. But in reality, underestimated truly means the opportunity has not been presented yet. So by me, my first opportunity, even though it was a bad deal, I asked for less money. I learned the hard way. And I said this on stage too. Like, I learned my first lesson the hard way because I was undereducated. I didn't have any mentors. And that's the lack that you see in these communities, is there's no one, like Jeff said, like, there's no one there saying, this is how you should do that. If I would have known better, I would have crowdfunded. I'm actually a partner with WeFunder. And even though it's crazy, I'm raising funds, but I'm not raising funds because I want to, look for those exits, which is, once again, crazy, but providing those opportunities, there are a lot of people that want to put money into communities to help create because of that. So that's what I kind of see in those communities, is the lack of people really asking for too little when they have the best idea, and someone's going to take advantage of that. Like, they're going to give you too little and they're just going to buy the idea from you. But it happened to me, and I got a nice payout, but I probably could have ran my train a little bit longer if I had the right guidance coming out of it.
I think you said underestimated in there. I think that is a fantastic way of drawing attention to this, and again, I come from originally the world of politics, right? In the rooms where we're creating words like underrepresented and things of this nature. And, frankly, I think that when you look at it as underestimated, that means the upside potential is dramatic, and it's the same principle, whether you're BIPOC, female, veteran, or otherwise. It's about leadership. And what I love, Mario, is that you're all about cultivating the leader. And, I think that's a game-changing philosophy, and I really respect you for that. Jeff, going to you brought up earlier the idea of you invest in things that you love, right? Henceforth, I can be honest with you, my portfolio of advising does not include Weight Watchers or any of these light eco foods or anything of this nature, because I spend my time where I love. But what I find interesting about you is you spend a lot of time in the crypto space. Matter of fact, you're one of the more celebrated people in that industry. And, I see a lot of people, coming up with the technology in the crypto space, new coins, ancillary technologies, and all of this. And then I see a whole class of investors that have probably never even bought or sold a bit of crypto, but are investing in some of these startup ancillary companies. I know you put your money where your mouth is. I know you spend time in this industry learning and everything. What is it about the crypto space that is drawing in such a fascinating assortment of investors? And what advice do you have for any startups that want to enter this arena?
Yeah, good question. I know for me, I've always been an early adopter. I love having these counterculture. I love being in these counterculture rooms where people are exploring new and crazy ideas. And I just happened to be in 2014 in organizing events for entrepreneurs and investors, and getting sucked into some of these back corner conversations where people were talking about mining and the new technologies that were coming out. And so I had some pretty early exposure to some guys doing some really cool stuff. And I know people are really excited about crypto right now, especially people seeing like Shiba Inu blowing up and going up almost 6 million% in the last year. And people are like, okay, well, this is crypto, but it seems to be a bunch of hype, and they're seeing NFTs and all these other pieces. But what they don't see is the underlying technology that is really, even on top of, you hear Bitcoin, but it's really blockchain that is revolutionizing the world when it comes to supply chain and so many other pieces of the world. I mean, it's really going to change everything. And that's what was exciting to me. You only get these kind of waves once. You think like the startup internet world, when internet was kind of introduced to the world and people were getting excited about the potential of the internet. People were really afraid of the internet in the early 1990s, not wanting to get adoption. And then AOL is trying to figure out how to get more and more people in on, getting online. And we're kind of at that same stage right now with the internet. We had the internet, then we had social media, and now we have this whole, decentralized, distributed technology that I think the government's afraid of, which is why a lot of institutional investors are still unsure about it, because banks and, big funds aren't sure how to handle it. And the SEC is coming down on a lot of things, but it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's only a matter of how and when it's going to be regulated. So for instance, one of the companies I'm a part of is based in Wyoming, and Wyoming has kind of blazed the trail for blockchain legislation and a lot of the undergirding laws that have to be in place. Because for instance, if you're in cannabis, cannabis business in general is tricky because it's not legal federally. And so banks and all sorts of issues. The same was with crypto. When we first got our company started 5 years ago, the bank wouldn't touch us if they knew that we were a crypto company. And we would start off by saying we're we're a technology company. And anyway, there's all kinds of issues that we were running into while we were starting this thing. But what's exciting to me is the potential to literally change every facet of society. Blockchain is going to impact blockchain, smart contracts, and all sorts of things. And so yes, I think investors are looking at it now, but more as a technology change. If you're looking at it from an investment perspective, like in just buying coins and holding, that's cool too. But investing it from a technology perspective is something that's really exciting to me, just to see the underlying foundation is being changed as a result of everything. So honestly, it's a steep learning curve when it comes to the crypto blockchain, community. And I've talked to a room of economists, I've talked to a room of finance people, and they're still like, what? Like, sure, I get it, but is this what it is? But I think—
How long have you been in that space, Jeff? When did you start in the crypto space? Were you an early adopter?
Since 2014. I wish I would have gotten in earlier. I had a friend that, most of my friends have been in it since the very beginning. I've tons of billionaire, people holding over 100,000 Bitcoin friends. Yeah, I can't even imagine holding on to cryptocurrency from when it was pennies to now where it's at $60,000+. Like,
I can't even hold on it for one day.
You know what I
like,
mean?
Exactly. I melt down, I'm just not a good.
I'm cashing out and I'm going to get, pay for my meal today. Right. So it is, but you have to, at the end of the day, a lot of people, especially right now, they're getting super excited about Shiba Inu blowing up. And they're like, it's quick. It's not about quick cash here. It's about an investment in the technology that I think is really, really important. And that's what we've been into. So we got into mining heavily and have been able to expand that into where we're at with high performance cloud computing, which is really,
and it's neat. Exciting. You've got some neat stuff going on over there. I mean, it's like Wayward Pines and that one facility you got built out in there. You can basically run the world. So impressed. Let me ask, in the crypto world, in the blockchain world, how does it stand when it comes down to underestimated populations, whether it be BIPOC, women, veterans, and all that? Frankly, I have not met that many diverse audiences in the crypto space. Is that the case?
I push back. I actually think there are in the circles. And obviously, it started kind of in the pockets of Silicon Valley, all these geeks, in their mother's basements coding. But now, because of the distributed, decentralized nature, removing banks from the equation, anybody can get access to it. And I think that's what allows people the opportunity to build and to grow. And you don't need permission anymore. You could just go and do it. And so to me, that's what's really excited. And this is what the banks and the government's really afraid of, is it's now kind of putting the power back in the hands of the people again, putting the power of money back in the hands of the people again, versus, controlling it. So I do think maybe not at the beginning, but now a huge diverse background. And, if you Google just cryptocurrency on YouTube, you'll see a whole slew of all different types of people, women, BIPOC, all kinds.
There's one called Polymath I see out there. I'm involved in the Polymath world, and people join the network. Shout out to Polymath Plays, Dr. Angela Catalesa, Kane Clamage. People join left and right thinking it has something to do with the cryptocurrency. That's how popular this actually has become. Let me jump over to Russell on this. Russell, you were at the technology. Bottom line is this: you saved the taxpayers $250 million before any of us had basically graduated high school. Me, 8th grade, for that matter. The company that I work with you on right now, Russell started in 94, 95-ish. He's had domains since the 80s. I didn't even know that was possible. This guy's been there. With all the fancy, trendy new technologies that are coming out nowadays, Russell, one of the very common things that you often talk to me about is social impact. And, I know you care a lot about society. You care a lot about founders and people. I would say that I'm a bit surprised how often you talk about it, being so, involved in the Silicon Valley infrastructure for so long. Where do you see social impact in startups playing a role when it comes down to investability, Russell?
Well, at the point that you're solving an actual problem in the world, you're not at risk of doing something where nobody cares. And again, that gets rid of a lot of risk. You still have the adoption risks that people aren't willing to do the things. But you've got a real problem to solve. You've got measures that you can solve it. And then you have all this free help. You have people that will write you grants, non-dilutive funding. You have people that are willing to volunteer to help you. You have people that do research. You sort of get interns and intern wannabes. The costs of everything go way down. And your ability to run experiments, your ability to try things. And when you go for the very small investors, a big part of what you're giving them is a story. Maybe they'll make money, maybe they won't, but it's 10 years out. They're not thinking about that. They're saying, what am I going to say at that cocktail party? It's like, one of our companies, we are making this amazing concrete rather than pushing carbon dioxide out in the air, third biggest source of CO2. It actually pulls carbon dioxide in. It makes stronger concrete. We made little pieces of it that people can show their friends. It's a great piece of story. So on the little end, you've got stories that they can tell at the cocktail parties. And at the big end, for big investors, they have their whole PR firm and say, we're saving the planet. and that PR is worth something for them. Whether your company makes it or not, they get story. There's essentially extra valuation you get because you're providing the value of bringing people story. Never underestimate the value of story.
I think that's so powerful, Russell. One of the great things about Founder Institute, where we're all mentors at, is when you're applying as a startup with an idea, one of the questions they ask is where your passion and focus, or which sustainable development goal from the United Nations do you feel that your startup and idea could impact the most? And this has been one of the most powerful things that brought me into FI at the very beginning. Adeo likes to call them for progress companies. And, one of the things I think is fantastic is Adeo's launched something called VC Lab. And this is ran out of Silicon Valley, and with a goal of launching 1,000 for progress VC firms, where built into the VC firms ethos is the notion of social impact, giving back, diversification, all of these things. How much of a role does the VC world play in the actual implementation of social impact initiatives from these startups and these founders, Russell? So for the audience that no, we did not mute, Russell held up what I'm assuming to be an extremely small measure. And I think that's very interesting. One of the things, there's a very interesting video on YouTube. Here's homework for everyone. I probably won't be popular for saying this, but I believe the YouTube video is called Silicon Valley's Ponzi Scheme. And the video itself is a fascinating description and understanding of how the VC world works. And what I think is great is that people like Mario Mitchell, who is sat here in building a fund, basically saying, you know what? That video doesn't matter. We can do things differently. We can focus on for progress things. We don't have to stick in one path. Just because I'm Black doesn't mean I only invest in Black companies. Just because I'm a male doesn't mean I only invest in male companies. And I think that this is a great push in the right direction. But at the same accord, let me ask, Mario, you're starting this fund at a very interesting time. Funds are everywhere. It's like Oprah's handing out funds left and right. It's scary and exciting at the same time. Why did you go down this path versus, let's say, doing the route that Jeff took and setting up the angel route, or pulling a Russell card and funding, would it be kind of index funds of startups? Why did you find it necessary to do what you're doing?
That's a great question. I actually answered that today too. So I always look at VC firms and I always see people like, first off, y'all caught me on a good day, like I'm wearing a button-up shirt. But in reality, I dress myself. I always found myself teetering between wanting to be professional and wanting to be myself. And I always ask myself, what is truly being professional? And we realize like VC firms traditionally have a look and a structure to them. I'm like, well, that's why we have so many barriers to get to the top, to get to who we need to speak to. So I'm like, let's wish-wash all that and let's create something around a culture. When I say a culture, most people are like, oh, so you want to do something Afro-tech? I'm like, no, I want to do something that's around the culture for young entrepreneurs like myself, people that I never went to a four-year school. I grew up poor and, like in a not so great neighborhood, and these opportunities never existed for me. So we're like, let's create this culture. We actually had a really good talk with someone from Include VC, and he's like, I love what you're doing because I have to dress up, because that's when I got into this realm of VC. You're doing something totally different. I love the concept because you're breaking the rules. I'm like, that's why they call me Mario the Disruptor, because I love breaking down walls that have been standing for so long, because I'm all about creating those opportunities. So when I first met Jeff, and Jeff's like told his whole story about how his VC experience and like what he does now, I'm like, that's what I love to hear. Like everyone is called right now. Like when I met Chris is like, I love what you're doing. He gave me all the props. I'm like, this is coming from good places, because I'm not the only one as a Black man identifying this. There are other people that sees the wrongs in the VC realm, and it needs to change. And so I'm like, instead of restating the problem, I'm gonna come with a solution, and I'm gonna create something that's gonna empower people to follow behind, so we can really change the structure of that.
I think that's fantastic. And, one of the things that we had talked about recently, the notion of never forgetting where you came from. I know you're from Mississippi, Mario, and, near your hometown right now, you're working and part of a team there, kind of establishing that entrepreneur ecosystem down there in Mississippi with some people. Why are you doing that? Here you are, you're across the country right now. Why are you going and doing what you can back where you came from?
So where I came from is who made me. So if I didn't have my past, I can never really define myself in the future. So knowing exactly where I came from and how I can take the shortcomings that I had growing up and all the good I got going from now, you should always want to give that, because, real change doesn't come when you just move away and forget about that. Real change comes when you go back and you instill some of that good back into the community. So I'm all about that real change. I'm speaking with city council right now. My grandma lives on the street. Kenneth Stokes was the city councilman when I was a kid in elementary school. And my grandma, my granddad just passed, and she cannot ride her hover around down the street to go see her friends because the streets are so bad. So I'm literally Thanksgiving going down there to basically, I'm gonna break the law, but I'm actually filling in all the holes on her street so she has the opportunity. So I honestly, like, if it wasn't for those things, I wouldn't have this good heart that I have to want to go back and do things. So we're putting money and innovation back into a city where I don't know how many people on the call, but if you've ever been in Mississippi, there's not much out there and there's not much to do. And what happens, like last year was the #1 homicide state in the US. And that's because there's not much getting put into it. So we're changing that narrative to where when people hear Mississippi, they think innovation and technology. And,
I think that's so great. And I know that a lot of the viewers are also chiming in and just saying how sweet that is, Mario. I know that there are people out here that will gladly come down there and help you fill in the streets, holes in there. Trust me, we tried doing that in Chicago at one point. It was not very popular to the city, but I'll be down there with you, my friend. Jeff, like I mentioned at the beginning, you gave a pretty epic speech at TEDx in New York, man. You have this interesting background, this interesting story. What is the #1 thing that drives you? What kept you with it to get all the way to where you are today, Jeff, as a leader in both the funding world and the crypto and blockchain scene? What is your driver?
Yeah, I love that question. I liked also that we brought up the word underestimated. My whole life, I felt underestimated. In fifth grade, I was diagnosed with ADHD, dyslexia, and a bunch of other things that kind of felt like I was counted out early on. I didn't do well in school, but I was really good at coming up with ideas and coming up with businesses and building teams and bringing stuff to fruition. And so for me, a lot of it was coming to a self-awareness of what I was good at and starting to lean into those things. Over time, sure, it took years for me to make a million mistakes and fail in order to figure out what I was good at. But it was having a strong self-awareness of the things I'm good at, as well as also understand the things I'm not good at to be able to supplement those things. So I'm not living out of alignment. One of the things I always talk about when it comes to starting a business and partnering with other people, and then also partnering with people who could fund you, is alignment. First, it starts with personal alignment. Do you know who you are? Do you know what wakes you up in the morning? Do you know what gets you going? And to me, that's super important. And when I know I'm in my sweet spot, it allows me to continue to work even harder. So yeah, I think being in alignment is something that keeps me going. But also I got to take a step back to find ways to realign. And obviously there's so many problems in the world. You could throw a dart and try to solve anything that's out there, but it's really the things that I have a passion for that get me up to make things available. And also, what the rest of the folks have said, like the fact that I was underestimated, I still have that chip on my shoulder, and I want to do all I can to help other people who also feel underestimated and empower them with the guidebook, with the path, with the mentorship as well, to be able to push through any storms that will come their way.
I think your advice, I guess your credo, is something that we should all follow. I'm very impressed with how you answered that. You brought up something like some challenges, some barriers and gaps. And, I think oftentimes in society, especially in the startup world, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Main Street, it's all the same. we often focus so much on our victories, celebrating all of the times we won, when many of us would probably agree that it's the reactions to failures that have put us on the pathway to where we're at right now. And, you brought up dyslexia, and Russell, Russell and I, we work together every single day on projects. And, when Russell gets behind a movement, he sticks with it. And I guess that's probably why he's had decades of success. And we were discussing the other day, about kind of evening the playing field for some of the other programs and accelerators around the world. There's not enough mentors out here. And, one of the questions we ask in our questionnaire is if there are any special, demographics that as a mentor, people like to work with, whether it be women leaders, BIPOC leaders, veterans. And of all the things Russell said, he said, Chris, we want to put dyslexic founders down there. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, Russell, that's a very specific thing to put on there. And this isn't the first time I've heard Russell say this, and you'll see it on our form coming up here. But the idea of never forgetting where you came from to the point where it becomes fundamental later in life is I think what does change the way people think in the world. Russell, why is it that you honed in on something like that dyslexia approach so much where it became something of conversation with us?
Well, the dyslexic population in the United States is one of the bimodal populations. We are overrepresented in success and overrepresented in failure. If we look at the unicorn and new unicorn companies, disproportional number of dyslexics. Look at the prison population, disproportional number of dyslexics. Look at successful upper management in ordinary companies, a lack of dyslexics. Got a lot of theories as to why the dyslexics end up doing well, and simpler ones as to why they're doing badly. You don't make it through school, it's harder to succeed. People are tempted to do less productive things. But what if we could go and say, here's the population that, given a little bit of support, would be really likely to succeed. We understand the half dozen main reasons of why dyslexics have problems in the world. Let's go and bring in tools, experts to help them with that. And could we potentially have an incubator with the highest success rate, the highest number of unicorns of anything in the history of the world, by taking a population that, I don't want to call it a disabled population, but a neuroatypical population, a population whose brains work differently.
Those were the superpower.
Yeah, that's a superpower. That's a good point.
Right, and the superpower very well may be that dyslexics, it's easy for things that sound right to appeal to people and just not take them and just not think about them. It seems that dyslexics are better at not falling into that trap. It seems that dyslexics, the successful ones anyway, are better at summarizing, better at teamwork. There are a lot of superpowers in dyslexia. And I'm willing to bet, but I haven't seen the research data, that if we could provide the right support, there's a different superpower for what we're calling ADHD. And there's a different superpower for what we're calling Asperger's. There are all of these people that if we give them a little bit better support, they would have this fantastic chance to do great things in the world that mere neurotypicals would miss entirely, in the same way that there are all these wonderful business opportunities that none of the men investors I spoke to yesterday could make heads or tails of, but every woman could see. Every difference in how the brain works, every difference in perspective is a chance to solve the world's problems, become massively rich, do great social good, that as an ordinary, sort of typical white male, I might just be missing.
I think that's just so amazing, Russell. And, we went back and forth on this, right? As I'm adjusting the form, because originally I had disabled founders. And then I'm like, do I put disabled / dyslexic, ADA? We went back and forth on words. And through this, the education that I received in finding out about something I didn't know was very prolific for me. And, as somebody who I was on the original clinical trials for ADD back before it was ADHD, it's been something that I would say has plagued my life, but also summarizes the very person I am. Matter of fact, one of the best professionals I've ever met, Stephanie Wilson, she's the editor-in-chief of Sensi magazine in the cannabis industry. We're both self-admitted ADHD. We like to call it specialists. We specialize in being that. But it has gone to be a superpower for her and being one of the most award-winning journalists and editors in the entire industry. So I love how you look at that, Russell, and I'm confident that we will find a solution for this. We don't have much time left. I've tried to address most of the questions going around the room. So I'm going to have one more question to exit this out. For all the people that are attending, for more information about how you work with us regularly, how you can have us be mentors, and how we learn from you as well, fi.co/Southwest. We'll give you all the information that we have. And frankly, we have over 70 mentors from around the world, leaders of Fortune 100 companies, startup leaders. We even have some television personalities and celebrities as part of our FI Southwest program, because this is a global program that is focused on high impact for progress companies who actually solve problems, much similar to what you've heard a lot of the people on the call tonight discuss. Final question for everybody. Very much a common practice nowadays is the pitch from the founder. My company's the best. My cannabinoid CBD formula is the highest tested. You can only get 100%. You can't go beyond that. So there's a lot of duplicity in the industry. What is the thing that makes the founder stand out? What is 101, this is what I need to do as a founder, pitching for investment, angel, equity, friends and family, borrowing money, whatever the situation is. What makes the person stand out in the crowd to you? Mario, I'm going to start with you.
I'm a big fan of passion and work ethic. So I hate being sold on what your product is. I want to know what it means to you, and I want to know your story. I think Lucy, she asked that question a couple of times, like, hey, I would love to hear your story. But I think every startup has a story and why we do what we do every day and why we think it's going to be profitable. So I love to hear the person's story and why they started their business. And that helps me understand who you are and why I want to work with you.
I think that's great. You said story, and somebody said earlier, it's all about the story. Coming from PR and marketing, that is true. But my bit of advice to everybody wants to be disruptive. Authenticity is the new disruptive. You're talking to 3 disruptive individuals on this panel with me tonight. Jeff, what is your bit of advice to the person that wants to know how they can get into that wallet of yours that we know is lined with crypto gold?
Crypto Bitcoin. That you spent some time to get to know me. I think one of the first things I find, a lot of people, they'll start diving into the problem that they're solving, but I've heard thousands of pitches, and I find the best pitches are those that use the sell me this pen method, where they ask me, hey, when was the last time you blankety 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 blank, to automatically draw me in to the story to see if I have any kind of alignment, or see if I resonate with the problem that they're solving right off the bat. And so to me, that's really big. That's what I look for. If they've actually spent some time to get to know me, my interests, my alignment, because to me, money is out there. There's so much money available in the world today. It's not hard to get access to it. It's just aligning your interest with the person who has the money's interest. And if you can find that alignment, it's not hard at all. So my advice would be, try to learn all you can about the interests, alignments, appreciations, things that gets them excited first, before you start asking them to solve your problem. I always say the easiest way to get what you want is by helping other people get what they want.
That's great. We cannot forget that the investors and funders, there are stakeholders as well. So it starts with relating to the stakeholder, just like you have to relate to the shareholder. Great advice, Jeff. Russell, back to you, my friend. I know a lot of people pitch you. You seem to be one of the most sought after advisors and mentors in the Founder Institute system globally. How do you get your attention to the point where, you're talking about this investment on calls like this? What is the secret sauce to you, Russell?
Let me back up a little bit. While there are 70 mentors in FI Southwest, there are 25,000 of them in the FI national ecosystem. And mentors from all over the world, not only cooperate during the program, but with the graduates. I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of mentors from countries I've never heard of, and they've done wonderful things for our startup. So it's not just the 70 of us here, it's an entire planet full, and when we colonize other planets, we'll take mentors from there as well. I think I'll take the opposite approach about authenticity being the new disruption, and I will say, avoid disruption like the plague. Disruption means it's really hard for people to adopt things. Adoption is where you fail. I want this to not be disruptive. I want it to be easy to adopt. It just make your life better. The biggest thing I'm looking for at this point as a first step is, can somebody in just one sentence tell me what their business is? I spend most of my life saying only two things. One is, what business are you in? And I've been known to say it to someone 30 or 40 times in a first meeting till I get the one sentence, followed closely by, your idea is much stronger than your presentation. I've now gotten to the point where we're saying, I can't tell whether your idea is absolutely asinine, stupid, and worthless, or whether I'm just missing the point entirely. And surprisingly often, I'm missing the point entirely. And 2 weeks and lots of sweat later, and it's explained as one sentence, it's like, wow, why didn't I see that the first time? You can't say it in one sentence. You don't know it well enough to be talking to investors yet.
Oh, and you remind me of this every single day. Russell calls me out on all of my leading questions. I come from the world of politics. We're built on leading questions, so when it boils down to it, it takes me paragraphs to describe it. I can say it in one sentence, but I don't. And I'm very thankful for people like Russell. I can tell you, Russell does office hours. We all do office hours at FI. And to see the amount of time that founders prepare for, let's say, a 15-minute meeting with Russell, it's like they get on with me as a mentor to help them prepare for the meeting with another mentor, because they know they're going to be asked tough questions. And that's the one thing. When you're asked tough questions, when it seems harder than you want it to be, chances are it's more authentic. Coming from the cannabis space, a lot of people are putting money into it right now. Find the investor that cares about the founder, and it will change your life. We have another event coming up on November 11th, followed by one on December 2nd. November 11th, we're having some people, some game-changing founders who are actually solving some social impact problems in rather unique ways that you would not tell from the surface. So we have about 6 people joining that, some from the cannabis industry, some from the fashion and retail industry, some military tech, even a biomedical equipment thing from Dr. Justin Lancaster, which I think you'll all find to be fascinating. So please visit fi.co/Southwest. You can apply for FI right through that website, and you will come across a very interesting DNA profile assessment, which will really give you perspective on the likelihood of potential success with your personality and skill set in the entrepreneurial space. So make sure you visit our website and stay tuned for November 11th. I appreciate all of the panelists tonight and look forward to all of you with your mentorship and hearing all the great things and the impact you make. So thanks everyone for joining us. Again, this is Chris Foltz, Director of Founder Institute Southwest, and I bid you all a good evening. Take care.